Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for being here to talk about something that is the buzzword, which is a terrible thing to be, AI. And we have exactly 45 minutes, so I'm going to jump right in, or just dive in, as they would say in AI. Now, before we start, I don't know how familiar all of you are with the different terminologies and sort of what AI even is. So we thought we would break it down. And we have panel members here who are experts. I thought, let's talk about what is AI. Can you tell everybody what it is? What do these terms like ASI, AGI, what do they mean? Because these are being thrown around everywhere, but not a lot of people know what they mean. Anyone can start.
Let me jump in first. I mean, first thing to understand is there's no scientifically accepted definition of intelligence. So we don't even know what natural intelligence is. To say we've got artificial intelligence, it's a catch-all label for computers doing smart things. And in the olden days, in the 60s, artificial intelligence meant a computer that used rules and knowledge and tried to tell you about the world by, using programming, massive programs, massive knowledge bases to tell you about the world. That ran into the ground. There was an AI winter. And we're now seeing a new resurgence of huge excitement around AI. And these are AIs that learn, so you don't explicitly program them. You train them on data sets, like, for example, writing or whatever. And they adjust. They're loosely modeled on the human brain. Sometimes they're called neural networks. And the more you train them, the more they tweak the connection strengths between the layers in these models of neurons to give you the right answers. But they're a million miles from the way the real brain works, and they're often plausible, they're not always right. Peter's actually used AI since the 90s and developed it. So, Peter, I hope my definition, an AGI is a fancy way of saying an AI that is as smart as we are. A lot of hype
smarter
about that. Remember, we've got a 20-watt brain here, really efficient. AIs burn tons of energy, so we're still way ahead, I think, of AI.
It's a very good roundup of the situation. Artificial intelligence is all about collecting lots of data, huge quantities of it, correlating some input data with output that you may be interested in, and finding, by the mechanism you referred to, some correlations that may lead to scientific discoveries or enable you to produce a trained system, which is then described as being in inference mode, where whatever you feed into it produces answers essentially instantaneously. That bypasses the training that Roger referred to, which can be colossally expensive in a number of respects: computational time, wall clock time, which means the ticking of the clock to get the results, and the energy consumption, which currently is threatening to go through the roof. We're talking about gigawatts of energy being required now for these large language models. That requires nuclear power stations, such as Microsoft's 3 Mile Island proposal to run its AI systems. But at root, this is purely a matter of statistical inference. You get lots of data on systems which you hope look like the one you're interested in, such that when you come up with the data for your case, the system will be able to instantaneously provide the missing answers. This is not a scientific method that explains what's going on. It's just statistical inference. And there are many problems that arise from that approach.
Thank you. Dhruvank, would you like to say anything about this?
Yeah. So when I look at AI, I'm looking at it from the consumer point of view. When you open your OTT platform and see that you have multiple shows with different thumbnails, and then when you open either a friend's profile or someone else's home, the same show will have a different thumbnail. That is, the thumbnails are getting customized for you because of your viewing preferences. Or maybe when you open a video platform and see the next video that comes to you, that is recommended through AI. So I am seeing it as more day-to-day, everyday, how we are using it and how AI is kind of helping us consume the information that we have around us in a much more efficient way, I would say.
Thank you. So, just to bring together what you have all said and also maybe simplify it a bit for the audience, am I right in saying that we have, some of us, lots of us, I hope, have something called human intelligence? It's a very hard thing to explain what makes up human intelligence. And up until now, until the 1990s, when you started doing this kind of work, human intelligence is not something which could be done in any form by machines, right? And we are going towards a paradigm in which we are seeing some human intelligent tasks being able to be performed by machines. To what extent is a different question, but really some amount of cognitive labor, which was previously done exclusively by humans, is now being done by machines, and that is artificial intelligence. Would that be a way of putting it?
That's too generic a description, because the advent of the computer in the first instance, in the wake of World War II, saw a scenario where it was doing precisely that, in particular for problems of a nature that you can formulate the mathematical representation of. For example, at Los Alamos, for nuclear weapons and how they detonate and the consequences of them, evolving into weather forecasting and climate prediction. These methods use our physical understanding of the world dialed into the computer, and they solve very complicated sets of equations that relate to the system in hand. That itself is remarkable and worthy of a gee whiz consideration. But at this point in time, that's all apparently gone by the board. We're impressed by an approach which doesn't claim to understand what it's representing, but spews out answers apparently instantaneously.
Humans seem to love that.
Humans have a talent for doing that as well. I don't want to
Exactly. So that's why they love it.
They love it. And this is the problem or challenge with conversational artificial intelligence, generative stuff, is that you can relate to it. You can go up to it and speak to it, write in English and other languages, and it produces correspondence with you using the principles I described earlier. But you feel you're interacting with it and something intelligent is going on. But in reality, there are huge numbers of errors and mistakes that these things are making, like humans do. It makes things up as it goes along. And we can discuss whether that invention is creative or corruptive.
So it's a bit like, we've had these hardworking computers who've been those people in the office who've been doing their job quietly and well for a really long time. And along comes AI, and it's very glib. It knows how to get all the attention. And suddenly everybody's saying that's the smartest thing in the room.
Yeah. But, when you think about the very first electronic computers, like in the Science Museum where I work, we've got the Pilot Ace, developed by Alan Turing, among others. People called them electronic brains because they could perform huge calculations. And in fact, a computer hundreds of years ago was a person doing calculations. And in Los Alamos used to have hundreds of female computers, So we've kind of changed our definition of AI over the years. But I can see why everyone's rapt by this session, because obviously now we've got AIs that can translate instantly. We've got AIs that could mimic my voice with enough training with my voice. We've got AIs that could overlay a voiceover with sound effects and so on, and do it in a pretty plausible way. As Peter says, it's not scientifically 100% accurate, but it's good enough to amuse your friends and get you quite a long way.
Got it. So now there's half of this panel, Dhruvank and I, are from the arts, and the two of you are from the sciences. And obviously the stakes and the implications of using AI in scientific fields as opposed to artistic fields is quite different. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, how is it different using AI in the fields of biology, physics, medicine, and for us in the arts? What are the implications? What are the ways it can play out in these different fields? And what are the minefields that these two paths face?
So, when you talk about the things which are the order of the day today, the large language models and ChatGPT, this is the kind of thing that has immediate impact on literary, people who are aspiring to write books and other things. They're also obviously concerned that their data and books that are already available are being scraped by large tech giants to serve their own profit basis, and that's certainly the case. So there's lots of issues around that. Scientifically, what one is concerned about here is often the accuracy with which the utterances are made. And I already stated earlier that there are lots of errors that accrue in these types of models. However, despite that, large organizations related to, for example, OpenAI and Microsoft, etc., are systematically trying to develop what they call foundational models, which is just, as it were, to balkanize or break up every sector that's scientifically available and create a foundational model out of that, such that the scientist actually doesn't, in the end, need to know anything anymore. They just ask the oracle, which is this large language model, to give it the answers to the questions it needs to address technically, and supposedly the large language model will go off and maybe sometimes do calculations or use databases to produce answers. But the problem is it's riddled with errors. And if you are just writing a school essay or an undergraduate essay, these kind of errors are not particularly critical, but they clearly can be in a context where you're doing research. So that's the area where it really matters scientifically. And in legal context, that can also be a problem. But the legal aspects then relate to the literary concerns that people have about these models being derived from other people's intellectual property or copyright and things like that. So there's, in practice, a continuum of issues that we have to face across the board here.
I mean, just to jump in on the science front, my favorite science AI tweet is, I wrote my first paper with AI and I changed every word. And I know what they mean. It's quite useful for a first pass to get, we're all confronted with that blank page and it kind of gets you over that. But once you start looking at what the AI has done, you often find it's quite deficient in various ways. But in fact, AI has been truly revolutionary in science in terms of AlphaFold, which is the very important problem of taking your genetic code and predicting the shape of the molecules in your body, which is crucial for drug discovery. And AlphaFold is really good at doing it but there's still limits to what it can do. There are still uncertainties in certain things. And for Peter and I, it kind of breaks down one of the main pillars of the scientific method, which is mechanistic understanding. You train the AI to make a prediction, but you don't actually understand how it got to that prediction. Its predictions are based on billions of parameters. They don't mean anything to the human mind. So there's a very fundamental issue with AI in science in that it doesn't give you mechanistic insights at the moment. They're working on it. So anyway, you want to hear about AI in publishing, so I will shut up.
We're going to talk about all of these fields. Dhruvank, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah. So on the arts or publishing or filmmaking, etc. See, I mean, we hear so much about how AI is helping in translations, in proofreading, making the process faster, simpler. A lot of people are using it to, let's say, do a story arc and run multiple simulations before they decide what is the one that they want to pick and then write about. But AI has interesting applications as well, where you're able to present information differently. Like my wife runs a startup called India Development Review. They write articles about the social sector, and they have about 2,500 articles. Recently, they put a small language model on top of it so that anyone can query that model and get much more detailed, refined answers. So that AI is working off really solid, credible, certified information and kind of helping the cause of researchers and making information more accessible. Other businesses are using AI to, let's say, do translation across multiple languages. They insert cultural nuances and they are opening up new markets for themselves. Like, it's not just India, but now they are going out to Middle East or Latin America, because now they can infuse a cultural nuance as well. So there are multiple uses of AI. But I mean, as we were talking, that look, the creative process is about the vision of that one person to actually get a hit. Because in entertainment, in arts, it is that big aha, or which is that breakout book or film or song, that is what makes all the difference. And that is driven by the vision of one person. And that, I don't think AI is yet there to replicate.
No, thank you. I think one of the things that the themes that is coming through in this is, first of all, I think we're all agreed that it's a very powerful technology. While it's not perfect, obviously the adoption rate has been extremely high, which means people are fascinated by it. Whether it's good or it's bad, the, it's caught the imagination of the entire world. What I would love to know from three of you is what, according to you, is the good, the bad, and the truly ugly about this moment in AI's history, so that people can see it isn't really, it's like we can go to one extreme and say that everything about AI is bad, but the fact is the genie is out of the bottle now and it's there. So people are going to have to learn how to engage with it, or at least have a basic understanding. For some people it's been very, very good, and for some people it is, got much worse ramifications to their jobs and their, what they're doing. So in your fields, what is the good, the bad, and the ugly of AI at this moment? I know you can't really answer it about the future, but about now.
The good aspect of it is that it enables us to look at very large sets of data, which can include books and other things, and make conclusions or sometimes discoveries of things such as correlations that may exist between large amounts of data that you didn't realize were connected. And that can lead in science to potential discoveries of new phenomena. But the problem with the way computer science deals with this is computer science isn't a science, despite the name. It's a technology. And the methods are purely technological. They're being brought in from, should we say, left field. And in fact, for reasons to do with power and politics and money, are visited on the scientific community as being the new way to do science. And that starts to get into the bad element of this, because the assumption that's being made by the people who are bankrolling this is that we will do science according to the principles of artificial intelligence. But everything we just spoke about indicates, as I said, it's a statistical method that isn't faithful to the individual. And at one fell swoop, if you take that into consideration, the application of artificial intelligence to an area like medicine, where people aspire to do personalized medicine, is flawed, because in order to predict my health from an AI system, I'm expected to get all the data on the many people that have their data records available. And a doctor is meant to, make a prediction or an action for me to carry out based on other people's data. In a country like India, I don't need to spend more than a nanosecond explaining to you why that's not a sensible policy, particularly when the data sets are white male Caucasians that are used in India for those purposes. That is dangerous. And the worst part of this is the political and power end of it, where it's being dropped on us along the lines I said, with no access to the technology's roots. And this is why DeepSeek is a remarkably interesting development in the last week, where China, for God's sake, has produced a software that's competitive and indeed superior to the very expensive and secret codes that the US tech companies have produced. And at one fell swoop, that's going to change the picture dramatically, because then actually even academics who have been far too in awe and uncritical of AI will at last have access to the codes from which they can develop things that can be properly evaluated and tested.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to what you said about politics in a minute, but after you both had your say.
No, you go first. Okay. So, firstly, I want to preface this by saying that in history, technology has disrupted businesses. Technological innovations have driven efficiencies, and that has been known to happen. What we are seeing today, I think, is that changes or developments in AI are happening so rapidly that by the time we kind of get our head around what is happening, something new comes. I think we are at that stage. But in terms of good, I think, yes, its ability to process large amounts of data is amazing. In the right hands, it can do wonders. I think if we talk about the bad, I think the bad is that it can produce a lot of content very quickly. Like too much video or too much text or too many clips, etc. The biggest problem today as consumers and businesses have is that what is the right content to watch, or what is the next piece of content that I watch or read, or where do I devote my time? Because the time that you have to devote to these things is finite. So just because we are able to do a lot of things doesn't mean that good quality is coming out of this. And I think the ugly part, and I think the whole fake news or the ability to create deep fakes is there. The danger is there. And I think we are still trying to figure how to address some of these issues.
So it's like just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, and what's the need? Right? Does the consumer value it at all?
I mean, we've covered a lot of the bad things. Deep fakes, very alarming and beginning to con people. AI in science, the fact that it's a black box, you can find an interesting correlation, but is it a real thing? Is it an empty correlation? In fact, you can argue that statistically there should be loads of correlations, but how many of them actually have a real mechanism behind them? Not so many, and so that's hard. When it comes to publishing, certainly as someone who's written 10 books, I am slightly alarmed by the thought that someone's using things that I've worked years on and scraping my content to train a model. I know they'll say, well, actually, that's the way the human mind works. You absorb loads of things and then you synthesize them and so on. But I still think the poor old content creator deserves some recognition in the whole process, particularly when it's carefully curated content. If you train an AI on Reddit, you're going to get a load of gobbledygook. If you train it on something like the New York Times or Nature or a carefully curated set of information, you're going to get a much better answer. Therefore, they deserve some sort of recognition. But interestingly, I talked to Jo Dickinson, who's a big UK publisher, about AI, and she made the point that they are dead against the use of AI to replace or put creators out of business. But there are some exceptions. So if you have an old book on your catalog, you can now cheaply produce a translation. Of course, who owns the rights to that translation? I'm not quite sure. You can produce an audio book much more easily. You might be able to create content you wouldn't have otherwise been able to afford to do. And something we were gossiping about, which is very close to your heart, is we've noticed that the books we've written together span 20 years, and the state of editing has got lighter and lighter and lighter. And crikey, if I had an AI editor that would give me a quick first pass, that would be better than some of the.
Those.
There's a brilliant, yes. In fact, cue the advert.
Thanks for the plug.
We'll be back after this.
No, but thank you. But there's one other thing, because I'm just keeping an eye on time. We've talked about all of these things from a artistic perspective, scientific perspective, and now I want to bring in something which is sort of powering all of this, and that's the political perspective. Because in this particular case, scientific advancement around AI is not immune from the politics of geopolitics. And there is an arms race currently on around the world, which is making decisions, which is causing decisions to be made, which are not, as you said, not entirely scientific, but they are powered by geopolitical considerations. So can you just tell the audience a little bit about what is happening around with the politics around AI?
I mean, actually, Kate Crawford wrote a really good book called Atlas of AI, Power, Politics and Environmental Impact. And it stood the test of time. That was published in 2021. I strongly recommend it to people. She captured all the essential issues there. I mean, there is no doubt that this is being fueled by the combination you're talking about, the enormous wealth of the companies and the control of so many sectors of modern industry, and the people who run them, who are widely known, in wealth distributions that are probably true in India, as well as in the UK, other Western countries, and particularly the USA, of order of 6 to 10 people have more wealth than 50% of the rest of the population. And those people are unaccountable, but they have huge influence. Many of them are known to us by name, and they are people who run those companies. And Elon Musk is now just a public fulfillment of everything I'm talking about. Their influence is phenomenal, and the way they will control things in their own interests is really important to understand. So when it comes to how we get AI served up as a humble scientist, I'm expected by my own government to buy into this stuff in order to get grants to do my research. And this is not acceptable because it's not a scientific approach. But that's one of the reasons why too many scientists simply don't criticize the matter. It needs to be resisted. And I want to say again, DeepSeek provides us at last with an opportunity to confront this issue head on and be able to develop tools that are in the open space and can be evaluated for their genuine scientific benefit or otherwise.
So in a way, what you're saying is DeepSeek has forced governments around the world, called their bluff.
It's only just started, but it's already bound to have that consequence. If you develop open source codes and methodologies, people are going to develop them in ways that are in their interests as a community rather than the interests of the people who want to make money and the governments that underpin it. And one aspect of this is clearly warfare. That's one of the most important things between superpowers. Have they got the advantage? You know, today it's not about the military directly, but it's about how you can control the virtual situation of the world. And that's what Cold War 2.0 is essentially about. I think it's now Cold War 2.1 with the release of DeepSeek here, because it's a counter sort of scenario that the Chinese have brought into play here. And I look forward to how things develop from here.
Thank you.
I mean, the Americans have tried to restrict the use of GPUs. You know, these are the, in fact, they came out of the gaming industry. So the graphic processing units is the official term, but these do the heavy lifting of AIs. And I think that's another reason why the DeepSeek announcement has shocked the Americans, because they thought they'd restricted the kind of chips that the Chinese could get access to. Now, whether they have by other means, I don't really know. But of course, Peter has emphasized the openness of DeepSeek, which is great. But remember, when you interact with an AI, it's getting information from you the whole time. You're training it. If you do the little thumbs up sign, you're teaching the AI more about how the world works. So there might be a downside to the whole world adopting DeepSeek. Anyway, interesting area.
I think you can download the stuff and run it
Locally,
totally yourself.
you
don't
locally,
have to sign up to the Chinese political agenda to use it. But another ramification of it that was hinted at before is what's called model collapse. It's already been shown and published in the august journal Nature, which seems to have a proclivity to support results coming from the big tech industry. That as you generate more and more stuff artificially by large language models, they're in danger of polluting the internet that we might have thought we know and love. And if you just keep iterating this stuff, it introduces more and more infelicities and mistakes, so that our own cultural heritage is at risk, and the predictions of these tools is going to become far less useful to us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm spending my time these days trying to figure how can I make audiences listen to the next song or hear the next podcast. I really don't have a point of view on geopolitics in this one.
Fair enough. Well, I have a ton of other questions that I'd like to ask you, but I know the audience also has a lot of questions, and I have had the luxury of talking to all of you this morning. So thank you so much. I thought we could open it up to the audience now. Do you have lots of questions? Please introduce yourself, and can we have questions and not comments and statements, please?
Okay. Hi, my name is Shailaja and I'm from Rashtrut. I would like to know, now with the AI coming in, with AI integrating everything, whatever the works have been done or whatever has been written and not written, how will the rules of copyright change? Because, if I want a poem, maybe there are many people here, who've written that poem and, it generates a poem for me, maybe. So how will the rules of copyright change? Now, is that copyrighted poem or can I use it? Is it mine? Is it AI's? What is it?
I think you've summed up the state of play, which is it's a battleground, basically. Creators like us want a stake, and obviously the tech giants that Peter's been talking about, they want it all for free, and there's going to be endless battles. And if there's one regime on the planet that tightens up copyright in favor of creators like us, you can be guaranteed that there'll be another regime that decides it wants to boost its AI industry by not having any license charges at all. It's a really complex situation at the moment.
There are lawsuits ongoing, for example, against Meta by a group of authors in California, which have evidence to show that Zuckerberg and senior members of his company were knowingly training their system using pirated copies of books, 200,000 or more of those, and that's supposed to be a bad thing. And the copyright issues that loom over that, I think Roger referred to earlier, are under debate now. We might like to think that the authors have total control over this, but the counter argument comes to the effect that actually, in general, authors have access to other people's works when they compose their own, and it's a shades of grey. Maybe you have to draw a line somewhere, but it's going to be fought out in the law courts, and that's US law. What will it look like elsewhere?
You'll be guaranteed the lawyers will get very rich on AI.
Yes.
Yes.
Javed Sab, you have a question.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Javed Akhtar. I'm a lyricist and a script writer. But at the moment, I'm not bothered whether my lyrics will be made through some other source and so on. These are minor issues. New rules will come. They can be controlled. These issues of copyright and so on. These are minor issues. The major issue is that anybody who doesn't believe in Adam and Eve and who believe that the life forms somehow chemically and then the brain got existence. And obviously, the very first day, the brain was not as developed as it is today, human brain. Gradually, first of all, it must have collected data, like artificial intelligence. When you have ample data, then the data starts contradicting another, and that is where the thought is born. Yeah. When the thought comes into existence, then comes the opinion, then comes the will, then comes the ego. I am afraid that we are talking about very minor and important issues. Ultimately, we have to think maybe in 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, do you think that artificial intelligence will go that way and will have its own opinion? It won't need your data anymore. It will have enough data or have the capacity to find data on its own and develop the science and capacity to create more computers, more robots who will be in IQ 1,000 times superior than the Homo sapien, who will be physically 1,000 times stronger than Homo sapien, who will be 1,000 times person, will have more IQ than human being. That is the risk.
Yeah.
And this is the risk that very few people are bothered about. It is not that my song, oh my God, I'm a songwriter, somebody will write a song like me. That's not important. What is important that human race for the first time can be threatened by a superior intelligence and superior being.
So we got the Terminator doomsday scenario here. No, I hear you. I mean, there's so many interesting issues that come out of what you said. Some people would argue that because the human brain has evolved with the body, we've got embodied intelligence.
Yeah.
There's been an endless dialogue.
Cognition. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Over evolution, we've evolved, our bodies have evolved with our brains. And so, okay, consciousness, no one can define what we mean by that either, but they would dispute that you could ever get a machine with consciousness. Also, we tend to anthropomorphize things. You know, bomb disposal people who use robots tend to talk about them as their friends because they're saving their life every day. And when a computer does something that surprises us, we tend to think it's got human-like intelligence. But I still think that we're a long way. The other thing that comes with all embodied intelligence and the intelligence that we've got is its general intelligence. We can solve lots of different problems. AI at the moment is brilliant at solving a very specific problem in a superhuman way. But if you said, could you do the washing up and cook me a curry, I think you're going to be in trouble. It hasn't got any means to do that. So there are issues there. And also, I think it's a lot of people are taking incremental improvements in AI performance and extrapolating and saying it'll be a human style intelligence. We have an analog computer in our brains. It runs on 20 watts. It's amazingly elegant, sophisticated, efficient design compared with computers. So I'm less worried than you in the near term.
No, I appreciate that you believe that whatever is not possible today will never be possible.
You can condemn me as a naive optimist.
There's much more profound issue here than just quantity of data equating with intelligence. In reality, it has nothing to do with the volume of data that makes something intelligent or smart. What we're ignoring here are other aspects of human behavior. Roger just alluded to it, but didn't develop it, which is that we are not computers in the sense of digital machines. Everything in this conversation so far is about what you can do with digital computers. There is an argument which is very powerful, which says that since we don't use the same method of computing, we are analog, we can solve problems that computers never will solve. And some of them are undecidability theorems. This is stuff that Gödel pointed out when David Hilbert was trying to algorithmatize the whole of mathematics. That is to say, that Hilbert wanted to show that any problem that you could cast in mathematical language, and it has to be to run on a computer, could be solved by a computer. And we know there's a large class of problems that are not in that category. Those are the non-computable problems. They're never discussed in AI because they can't access it. But our intelligence solves those problems, and it's a completely different class of problem. And no amount of data you throw at a computer using digital computers will reach that level of capability.
Thank you. The gentleman over there.
Thank you. I am just curious. Can I?
Go ahead.
I'm just curious how readers, what kind of feedback readers has for AI content. What is your experience? If you have seen the difference between how readers respect AI content, is it different than like a regular creativity human intelligence have?
Should I try and answer this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an easy one actually for me to answer, because one of the most common fears, and I want to say for all you writers out there who think that AI is going to produce endless numbers of books and sell them, I can just tell you from my 20 years of experience as a publisher, it's very hard to convince people to read books even by Nobel Prize winners. So it's not, the problem is not one of quantity, it's of quality. What happens is that there is, even if you have an infinite number of books coming out which are produced by AI, the number of readers remains the same or less. They're reducing every year. So you talked about discoverability. I do not think that the book industry is going to face a problem where suddenly AI generated content is going to take over, because that's not how readers decide how to read. Which is also not to say that people will not read books which are generated by AI. Probably you will see a mix of the two. But not enough content was never the problem. So it's the wrong problem people think is being solved. Yes, you. Yeah. We have time for one more question after this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jasrita. I've worked in healthcare communications. My question is to Peter and to Roger. The healthcare algorithms that power AI, we know, are known to perpetuate the bias against some underrepresented communities, and they could actually amplify the gender and racial inequalities which are prevalent in surgery and medicine. So what are the guardrails, according to you, so that AI doesn't create a world more unequal than it already is?
Roger and I were in conversation in another room at 11 a.m. today about the concept of digital twins, better known in India as avatars, of yourself. The solution to this problem is clearly not to use AI, which is just built on data sets of other people, and expect to have the temerity to predict your health based on that. No, it's the scientific answer, and that is to use your data with a computer model, which is your avatar, to predict your health. And at one fell swoop, saying it like that, you understand that every single person in this room, and in principle in India, is then going to be treated on the same footing, because we understand, if we understand medicine properly, what the mechanisms are, and with your data in the model, we will be able to predict stuff that's relevant to you. That's the aspiration of digital twins or avatars in medicine, and it's only just getting going. But in dealing with that, we have to face this sort of hurricane or noise of AI being brought down to say we can already solve those problems, because AI looks good, it gets you answers immediately, and people are impatient. So that's a challenge. And inside any country like this one, you have to worry about healthcare inequalities, because you might say it's going to cost a fortune to produce your own avatar and only the wealthy will manage it. And this is something you have to address on a national scale. But you need electronic communications to achieve this. And that's the point I like to make in India. Everyone here has a mobile phone. You're the biggest population in the world. You all have mobile phones. So you've got an advantage in interacting with your own data, like your bank account, to deal with these problems. Most of the rest of the world is not in that position. The UK, maybe 15% of the population don't have a mobile phone, and they're denied access to their legal rights under the UK's National Health Service. So there's lots of things here that we can work on to make sure this is done in a democratic and controlled way and doesn't reflect biases that are imposed on us by other people.
Thank you.
I mean, the bias question is a great one. If you trained an AI on all the world's data, health data, it would be brilliant for pale male, stale blokes like me, not so good for a young woman in sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, it'd be pretty terrible. It's one size fits all medicine. People are trying to correct that by collecting broader data sets. In fact, the UK's got some huge health data projects, our Future Health, UK Biobank, which are getting a much more diverse view. But you're absolutely right. It's the old computer maxim, rubbish in, rubbish out. You've got to train your AI on the right data, otherwise you get nonsense results.
Thank you. We have one more question.
I'm a literary translator. I've been working for 30 years on literature from different parts of the Anglophone world, from India too. And I wanted to ask you, if you had an audience made of literary translators, we've already lost some jobs. Let's say, like people like me, we work 90% of literature, but the money comes from, I don't know, museum catalogs, advertisement. Most of us have already lost our jobs. Okay, the quality is bad, but nobody cares. But if you had an audience of just literary translators, I always tell my colleagues that I think we should be ready to become editors, but maybe I'm pessimistic. But I think the problem is not really the improvement, but also like how much quality do the publishers want? Like if me and you, we work with very good, publishing houses, but what happens to my students who start with smallish publishing houses who maybe want to save money?
So the question is that
like how
should you deal with this?
Like how long will it take to reach a level that is very high? Because
okay,
I've seen it. I test it every now and then. I don't use it, and for some writers I translate, it's useless. Mm-hmm. But commercial literature, I've seen it improving, and I've seen colleagues working on more commercial stuff.
So I'll try and answer that very quickly.
Yeah.
One of the most confusing things which AI companies do is they release models, variations of models which have funny names which nobody can follow. But it's part of my job to follow and test all of these different models. So we have in fact found some models within models which are very good at doing this. There are some languages in which you have a lot of translators, French, Spanish, you already have. But there are many other languages that it's very hard to find good translators. So it's not a one-size-fits-all question. You got Palak over here, and she will show you where it works and where it doesn't. I would say overall, if you're using the right model, the quality has improved dramatically, even for literary translation. That's what we are seeing when we work with publishers and languages around the world. But I know that we're out of time. I'm sorry, I know there was one other gentleman, but thank you to all of you and to the audience for being so engaged throughout the session.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.